Hello, welcome back to my fave fanfics. Here, I post, well, my favorite fanfictions, if that wasn't obvious. I do hope you'll enjoy them as much as I do. Please like and subscribe for more content. Without further ado, let's get started.
Welcome, my dear faves, to the third part of What If Minato Yeeted Himself and His Son into the World of Demon Slayer. Credit goes to SapavemLasae. Chapter 9. Gaze of the Unknown. The master sends his replies soon after breakfast has been served and eaten. Minato sits next to his son while Shinjiro calmly instructs Kyojuro on his duties for the day. The morning sun streams in through several of the opened windows and basks them in warmth. Ruka rests in her room as she prepares for the day ahead. They leave before she is awake. Naruto and Kyojuro are informed to remain home and try not to cause too much trouble for the woman. Minato takes extra care to ensure Naruto has the necklace he inscribed the Flying Thunder God seal onto before he follows Shinjiro out the door. They leave the house and Shinjiro sets a brisk pace to the master's mansion with Minato trailing behind him. Mostly, they are silent and don't converse with one another. Shinjiro especially is pondering the haze that appeared around Minato and how much he had felt like a demon when the man had let his killing intent be known. They only speak when they arrive at the secluded mansion caged in by wisteria blossoms. Minato takes a moment to admire the beauty of the violet flowers before he catches up to Shinjiro. I thought it was odd before, but now it seems to be a common thing. Do all demon slayers plant wisteria near their homes? Minato asks as they enter the main gates of the estate. His eyes shift over the few patrons milling about, mostly Kikuchi, who are tending to one duty or the other. Shinjiro eyes him as he responds, the wisteria is poisonous to demons. For some reason, most demons can't handle it and thus it keeps them away from our homes. This area especially is filled with it. Minato nods and they make their way past the maze of walls and through the compound. It's larger than the Rengoku estate and boasts a few dozen people compared to the 3 of the Rengoku estate. Each building is styled like traditional architecture. Minato notes where they come from more out of habit than actual fear of something occurring. They finally enter a large courtyard paved with small stones. A tree sits in the center while the porch of a home situates itself on the opposite wall. Minato gazes at the well-kept grounds before sweeping to a group of figures gathered at the base of the porch. There are 3. One who looks aged but also holds himself much like Hiruzen did in his prime. Minato recognizes the tension in his shoulders and files it away as they near. The man has calming blue robes on his person, decorated with carefully stitched waves that would be flashy on anyone else but just seem to suit his dire countenance. His mask completes the ensemble despite its depiction of the bright red face of an Oni. At his side is a black sheath with a blue-handled blade. Minato tries to remain calm and not tense, but he doesn't have the best history with masked figures after dealing with Akatsuki. He thinks instead of Anbu, breathes, and lets the tension slide from his shoulders as he looks at the only other figure in the yard. This one looks closer to Shinjiro's age, though he is hunched and much smaller. He has a cane that he holds onto as his head shifts in their direction. His robes are a bright yellow color dotted with rows of white triangles. He has a firm mustache and combed back hair held in a neat bun. He thankfully is not wearing any sort of mask. A blade with a black sheath rests at his side. Shinjiro, dragging someone else along with you to this? Or is this boy the reason the meeting was called so suddenly? The shorter of the other 2 men speak. He has a rough but heavy voice that leaves very little room for discussion. His tone is much more jaded than Minato would have thought it would be with just a touch of teasing. Shinjuru's face shifts, contorting into annoyance as he glares at the other man. "Jigoro, mind your own business, you nosy old fart. You'll learn about it soon enough," he snaps. Minato's brow quirks at the obvious hostility. It's more playful than dangerous, but it is obvious that these two have a sort of rivalry going on. They seem used to this type of greeting. It reminds Minato of the way Kushina would greet Tsunade. Odd but still caring. "Shinjuru, Jigoro is merely interested in your new friend. We will be addressing the matter with the master anyway, so why not tell us now?" The other party spoke, and his mask shifted to Minato. Minato smiles sheepishly, but he can feel a spark of something from this other man. He doesn't like being put on display and tries to shift their attention away by playing the fool. Shinjuru casts a glance at him that tells him he notices the sudden change and the tension drawn in his shoulders, but Minato can't bring himself to care. Now, there's no need for hostility. "I'm Minato, it's a pleasure to meet you," Minato says as he allows himself to slip into the familiar mask of an airhead Hokage. He had years of experience in controlling conversations and he would use it if needed. Jigoro huffs, but at this point they are close enough that Minato also hears the gruff chuckle underlying the annoyed sound. "Well, aren't you just a polite kid? I'm sure you get a good amount of this from Shinjuru anyway. Well, unless that sweet wife of his is keeping him in check." Jigoro chatters, grinning under his mustache as he eyes Minato carefully. Minato nods politely but says nothing. He can still feel the gaze of the other two on him, and it makes him feel like he is being studied under a microscope. Not the most pleasant experience. "Kuwajima Jigoro, I'm the Thunder Hashira," Jigoro offers when Minato doesn't waver under his gaze. A hum brings Minato's attention to the masked man. He inclines his head to Minato but doesn't so much as offer a hand from where they are tucked in his robes. "I am Sakanji Urokodaki, the Water Hashira." Minato inclines his head, mind wandering. He had heard Shinjuru mention the word Hashira before, but he hadn't been able to ask. Now he wanted to, but he also didn't want the others to know about his lapse in knowledge. Shinjuru stepped forward, partially blocking Minato from view. "Now that introductions are out of the way, perhaps we should," he began but was interrupted by a pattering of small feet. Minato's head snapped over to see a young boy, possibly the same age as Rengoku or a little older, walking to the middle of the porch. "The master is ready to see you," the boy intones in a quiet voice. Minato scans the boy carefully, noticing his pale eyes and delicate countenance. Something feels off with his chakra too. Shinjuru gently grabs Minato's shoulder as the other two men immediately shut up. They all drop to their knees and bow their heads low as the boy opens a door. Minato lets Shinjuru guide him into the same position even if he feels odd bowing to someone he has never met. His head isn't quite inclined and instead partially raised to watch the new person enter. A man with white robes similar to the boy's walks onto the porch. Minato waits with the others, his gaze raised just enough to see the man's knees. He shifts his gaze to Shinjuru and finds the man has bowed his head just as deeply as the other Hashira have. They all look incredibly serious and there is a heavy air of respect in the courtyard. "Raise your heads," a voice calls. It's incredibly soft and gentle. Minato raises his head and has to stifle a noise of surprise. The man, their master, looks like an older version of the boy. He has dark hair that is cropped close to his neck and pale skin. He looks delicate and his face is disfigured. Minato has seen many injuries, but nothing quite compares to the boils and rotted skin on the face of the man. It's scarred and it has recently been cleaned, but the wound is an ugly one that looks like it has been there for years. How are you today, my pillars? The man speaks, his tone very similar to Hiruzen's when the man would visit the academy. He is gentle and kind, something that Minato is sure is genuine. He's gotten good at finding fake emotions and this man truly cares. We are well, Oyakata-sama. Shinjiro speaks from Minato's side. His voice is full of respect and reverence. He is focused on the man and notes of happiness and sadness waft from him. It's much the same for the other two Hashira. I am pleased to hear that. Now, I believe that we gathered here for a reason. Is your friend present, Shinjiro? Oyakata asks as his gaze shifts to where Minato is sitting. Despite being blind, he has no trouble discerning Minato's position. Minato hums and with a nod from Shinjiro speaks. Yes, my name is Minato and Shinjiro saved my son and I from a demon 2 nights ago. Minato addressed the man similar enough to how he would address councilmen. With just enough respect to get by and a healthy dose of his own weight in his words. Oyakata-sama only smiled at him. No family name, Minato-san? He asked, but his question made Minato tense. His eyes narrowed on the man and he could feel Shinjiro's hand clench around his shoulder in warning. Namikaze Uzumaki, if I must give one, Minato finally offered after receiving a glare from Shinjiro. He was not happy to give it out, but at the same time, he could admit there wasn't anything bad about giving it out. In a world where neither of those clans existed, there was no reason to hide beyond Minato's paranoia. He swallowed a lump in his throat, let out a heavy breath, and then forced himself to relax. He took up the same mask he wore as Hokage and chided himself for being so on edge. I don't believe I have heard of that one. Minato-san, would you mind coming closer? Oyakata asked him. Minato ignored the look Shinjiro cast his way again as he rose to his feet. He took a step in front of Oyakata and cast a small smile at the little boy at his side. The boy's eyes widened a fraction, but he offered a small smile back. A hand settled on Minato's shoulder, but he let it. The hand shifted over his face and then stopped just over Minato's cheek. Cold fingers brushed the skin there and Minato swallowed a gasp as he felt a pulse of chakra. Yin chakra, harsh and twisted. It flashed over him as his eyes darted across the man's face again. Tell me, you are a shinobi, are you not? Oyakata murmured to him, his voice incredibly quiet. Only his lips moving betrayed his words to the others that were present, but even then they could only catch the smallest bits of what he had said to Minato. Minato gazed at the man in hidden surprise. The hand drifted from his face back to his shoulder and gave a light squeeze. Oyakata's shoulder shook as he gripped him and Minato almost feared he would hurt himself before he let go. There were others like you. Lost to our history at some point, written in accounts by my father and his father before him. You are very much like them. Other clans settled not far away from here. Are you from those clans? Oyakata asked him. Minato hummed as he debated. When he had decided what to say, he spoke just as softly, I am not from here, not really. I've traveled a long way to get here. There was a twitch of his lips and an incline of Oyakata's head. Then the man turned to address the others as his hand fell from Minato's shoulder. My pillars, I believe Namikaze-san wanted to become a demon slayer. Shinjiro here has deemed him capable of learning a breathing style. I trust you can figure out which style would suit him? He asked. Minato took a step back as the other pillars rose to their feet. They were still respectful of Oyakata as they took spots directly next to Minato and Shinjiro. "Hi, Oyakata-sama," Jigoro and Sakanji answered. Minato watched the master as he reached to grab his son's hand. "Very well, I leave him in your care. Namikaze-san, please join me for dinner after you have finished deciding on your teacher." "I would like to talk to you," Oyakata all but ordered, the stipulation that they would chat alone left unsaid. Minato managed to tell the man an affirmative before he was led back inside. Abruptly the warmth he had around him faded with the shutting of the door. Minato watched him go, and only when he was sure the man was gone did he turn to the others. "You went ahead and tested him before you came, Shinjiro?" Sakanji asked as he stepped around Shinjiro's right side. Jigoro assessed Minato from Minato's left side as he looked at Shinjiro expectantly. Shinjiro nodded, his eyes shifting to Minato's. "He's on par with myself as a Hashira in physical and mental prowess. He lacks with a blade, but that doesn't hold him back in combat potential," he informs the other pillars. Jigoro raises a brow and huffs as he looks Minato over. "I'm not sure I believe you. He's a bit of a pretty boy," Jigoro begins but freezes as Minato smiles and vanishes in a yellow flash. He appears behind Jigoro, hand armed with a kunai at the man's neck. "A pretty boy who can kill, Kuwajima-san," Minato says with an air of innocence to him that wraps right back around to being deadly. Sakanji tensed next to Shinjiro and Shinjiro is eyeing Minato warily. Minato drops the kunai to his side and walks back to Shinjiro, ignoring the eyes on him. "Well, I suppose he is quite skilled. Namikaze, what would you gauge your abilities at?" Sakanji asks. His tone is sharp and commanding. Minato flashes him a smile. "Minato, if you would, I don't go by my family name here. And as for my skills, I would say enough to take you on. I knocked Shinjiro on his feet yesterday," Minato told him. He kept the dangerous smile in place in case the other Hashira got any ideas. Both Hashira turned to Shinjiro to see if what Minato says is true. The flame Hashira nods sharply at them and earns himself a chuckle from Jigoro and a hum from Sakanji. Sakanji turns his head back to Minato and seems to be deciding where to go next. "You are incredibly fast. Thunder breathing would be good for you. It's not as fluid as water breathing, but it has unmatched speed potential out of the current breathing forms. You could use it as a basis for your own style of breathing as well," Sakanji finally spoke. Minato let a brow raise and relaxed his smile to something more genuine. He shifted his gaze to the Thunder Hashira as Jigoro nodded sharply at him. "Perhaps we should explain the breathing styles first, perhaps over some food," Shinjiro cut into the conversation, eyes assessing all of the different parties. Minato inclined his head. He would very much like to learn more about the Hashira and their organization as well, and this seemed like the best opportunity to learn. Shinjiro then gestured outside of the courtyard where Minato assumed they would find a place to eat. The other Hashira fell in line and soon Minato was trailing behind his newfound friend to another estate just a few blocks away from the master's mansion. They found themselves being seated by figures in black cloaks, Kakushi as Shinjiro informed Minato, before they were given large portions of rice and meat as well as several dishes of vegetables, soups, and pots of tea. Once they had sat down, Shinjiro began to tell Minato about the breathing styles. There are 5 core breathing styles. You know of flame, water, and thunder, but there are also stone and wind. These core styles set a precedent for breathing styles, and there have been past cases where a new style was developed underneath one of these. Typically, a trainer teaches someone how to use a breathing style. Shinjiro began. Sakanji picks up the conversation after he daps a cloth over his mouth to clean it. Water breathing is about flow and flexibility. Think of it as though it mimics water. Thunder breathing is swift like lightning when it strikes. It is the fastest of the main forms, Jigoro tacks on. Shinjiro huffs at him and finishes a cup of sake as he narrows his eyes on the man. Hattori would disagree with you. Even so, wind breathing is another quick style. The current wind Hashira is away on a mission, but he would tell you that wind breathing focuses on whirlwinds and replicating their motions in your movements. Hattori is the current wind Hashira, though only because his master died several months ago in combat. He's a tad young, but he is well equipped. Shinjiro spoke and then tapped the table with a finger. He ignores the annoyed huff from Jigoro with practiced ease. Flame breathing is mostly about powerful bursts of energy directed at singular blows or deflections. He comments and glances over to Sakanji. Sakanji nods his head and tilts his mask up to take a drink. When he is finished, he tells Minato about the other style. Stone breathing is all about defense and keeping yourself grounded so you can deliver heavy attacks. I don't see you benefiting from this style. Minato nods and murmurs his thanks for the explanation. His hand raises to his chin as he ponders the information presented aloud. Wind and thunder sound the most like my own fighting style, though water isn't far from it. I think my wife would have enjoyed that style. Flame breathing does not seem like it would match the way I fight. Minato looked up as he finished, catching Jigoro's eye. Would you be willing to give me a demonstration? Possibly even spar me with your style so I could understand it better? He asked as he made his decision. Jigoro laughed at him as he slammed his hand on the table and rose. He left his cane behind and his eyes rose in challenge. If you want a spar, then I'll give you one. Show me what you got, pretty boy, he taunts. Minato's brow almost twitches. Only 2 women were allowed to call him that, and that was only because Minato couldn't stop one and the other was his wife. Jigoro was neither female nor an Uzumaki or Senju, so Minato could forgive himself for getting angry. Just don't let me hurt you. I would hate to cause you trouble, Minato offered instead as he rose with the man. Shinjiro looked halfway between telling him to calm down and wanting to watch the fight. Sakanji let out an aggrieved sigh but stood to oversee the match. They found themselves in the walled walkway between the master's estate and where they had sat to eat. Minato eyed the area as he prepared himself. Jigoro took a spot 5 feet in front of him and Sakanji stood in the middle against the wall. Shinjiro let out a sigh and watched them as Sakanji gave the signal to start. Jigoro drew his blade in a flash. He rushed toward Minato so quickly that he looked like a blur. Minato narrowed his eyes and set chakra in his feet so he would be prepared. Then he tapped his hand on his side, summoned his blade, and blocked the strike Jigoro had aimed at his head. A loud clang sounded. Jigoro didn't pause as he gruffly called, "First form, thunderclap and flash." Quote. He vanished from Minato's side but the shinobi was ready. Minato pivoted to block the next slash, ducked under the second, sidestepped the third, and rounded to block the fourth. Jigoro looked like lightning ripping through the air as he wove around Minato expertly. Second form, Rice Spirit. Jigoro called next and Minato was forced to back away as 5 successive slashes followed by lightning were sent his way. He flashed through hand signs, his left hand hitting the ground quickly. Earth Style, Mud Wall. Minato called and the stone rose to block each of the strikes. Third form, Thunder Swarm. Jigoro calls next. At this point, Minato is seeing a pattern. He grins at the man even though he can't see it. There is a flicker above the wall and Minato jumps back again, finding himself further down the path as Jigoro picks up speed and bears down on him. His strikes are quick, surrounding and encompassing Minato. He has a few options but he eyes Jigoro's cane from where it is leaning on the wall where Shinjiro put it and makes a split-second decision. He vanishes, replaced by the cane as he bounces off the wall next to Sakanji and Shinjiro. Both men jolt to face him with jerky movements half aborted by the time they register it is Minato. Minato dives behind Jigoro as the man sputters. Wind style, Gale Cutter. Minato calls, more testing than aiming to kill. He strikes at Jigoro and the man twists around to face him. Jigoro grits his teeth, holds his ground, and then blitzes again. Minato recognizes the first form again and blocks accordingly. The clang echoes as Minato casts a smile at his opponent. There's another pause, another lull, and then Jigoro strikes again. Fourth form, Distant Thunder. He snaps and Minato's eyes widen as a ball of electricity fires at him from the edge of Jigoro's blade. The ball crackles and bolts of lightning trail around it, striking on all sides and forcing Minato to rethink blocking. He takes a different approach and thinks back to his kunai, littered liberally around the walkway as he moved. Her flashes, a yellow blur flickering in place several feet away from Jigoro and away from the torrent of light. Jigoro watches him, used to his flickering at this point. "That's a rather neat technique you have there," Jigoro says, large brows furrowing. Minato allows a chuckle to leave his lips. "Techniques, actually," he says, but he is pressing back on Jigoro in another instant as his blade dips down, around, and he strikes down with the aid of the spinning motion. Jigoro huffs and sidesteps the move, shifting quickly along the ground as he puts more distance between them. When he is back in his original spot and Minato has spun back around to face him, he lets loose his next attack. Fifth form, Heat Lightning. He jabs his blade and a crackling burst shoots from the tip at Minato. Minato narrows his eyes on the strike and braces himself. He blocks the strike but has to quickly teleport with the Flying Thunder God when Jigoro calls, sixth form, Rumble and Flash. Quote, Jigoro makes quick and sharp slashes as Minato vanishes from the spot again, bolts of lightning slamming together with a large crackle as Jigoro makes multiple strikes where Minato had been. Minato watches them and murmurs under his breath. He is hardly fit to fight this man with just Kenjutsu, not when Jigoro is faster than Shinjiro and proves to be incredibly skilled with his blade. Minato settles into his stance and grins as Jigoro rounds on him again. He lets Jigoro get close and notices that the man also has an eye on the nearby kunai. He is incredibly vigilant and he learns quickly, Minato notes. Minato doesn't vanish this time and instead parries the lightning-fast strike with another edge of chakra aiding his movements. He slides under the strike, guiding it over his head as he spins into Jigoro's guard and swiftly kicks him across the chest similar to how he downed Shinjiro. Jigoro manages to brace himself but he still goes flying. He grits his teeth but shifts and whips his blade around as he skids into a crouch across the walkway. Taijutsu comes easily and Minato doesn't let Jigoro keep a distance between them. He seals his weapon and instead grabs kunai as he slips through Jigoro's guard from the side and continually pressed his assault of physical attacks. Jigoro is more than surprised at his abrupt change of tactics. He struggles at close range, and with his kunai and chakra aiding his movements, Minato keeps up with him. Wind edges on his limbs, and soon Jigoro learns that bracing is not enough, as a strike that would have hit his chest is smartly dodged instead. Minato's foot drives a gouge into the earth. "That's enough," Sakanji says, and immediately Minato straightens and slides his kunai back into their pouch. He smiles at Jigoro despite the man's ruffled appearance. His eyes shift to the walkway and take in the damage. It's nothing terrible, a fair bit of scuffing on the surface, but nothing Minato can't fix. He walks past his opponent without a care in the world, because he does not doubt that Jigoro won't attack him after his friend called the spar to a halt. He instead flashes through hand signs and slams his palms into the ground. The mud wall from earlier shifts and plummets back into the ground. The haze of chakra around Minato spreads as everything rights itself. Beyond the scuffs of ash from the heat of Minato and Jigoro's feet along the ground, everything is in place. "That technique, what was that?" Jigoro demands. Minato turns to look at him and then glances at Shinjiro. Shinjiro's lips are set in a line as he observes the earth that has been put back to normal. Minato then shrugs at the man as he explains, "Techniques from a shinobi. I can introduce my energy into nature and manipulate other elements. I can also do that to wind, water, fire, and lightning." Jigoro's mustache wiggles as he concentrates, earning him an odd glance from Minato before Minato's attention is dragged to the water Hashira. Sakanji speaks, directing their attention to the battered cane on the ground. "I take it that you used something similar to switch places with Jigoro's cane?" he asks. Jigoro grumbles and walks over to get his cane despite his lack of need for it. Minato nods in response but does not elaborate. He has a feeling that Sakanji is figuring it out on his own anyway. "Is it something like that teleportation technique?" Shinjiro asks instead. Minato shakes his head. "That was called the replacement technique. Flying Thunder God is a lot different while also proving to be more dangerous. Each has its uses, and as it stood, I saw the object before I felt for one of my seals. The replacement technique works best with a target as similar to your size as possible, and the closer it is, the easier it is. Other people have a finicky chance of being affected, so typically inanimate objects work best. It acts as a swap using chakra as a conduit," he informs the man. Shinjiro blinked and nodded. He then looked at Jigoro as his lips twitched. "He hit you hard, didn't he?" He's very good at figuring out the best way to fight his opponents, and he seemed to realize you need room to build up speed. "How smart," Shinjiro says in light jest. Jigoro waves him back with a chuff. "Well, at least I fought well. I also didn't get knocked down by Minato," he began but was drowned out as Shinjiro snapped back. "I didn't damage my belongings trying to get to him." Minato finds a calm presence at his side as the two Hashira begin to bicker like children. Headstrong and dangerous children, but still children. Sakanji ignores them with practiced ease that tells Minato this happens more often than not. Oddly enough, it reminds him of how Jiraiya bickered with Tsunade. He shakes his head fondly. "You have impressive flexibility as well. I had not expected you to be so well-rounded. If you were open to it, I would be willing to teach you water breathing," he begins, before continuing, "I have 2 students currently, both who are learning from the beginning of the techniques." There's a sharp snap and suddenly Jigoro is in front of Minato again. "I don't think so, this boy is suited for thunder breathing." He was incredibly quick and adapted well to the situation. I also have a student, but she could benefit from someone else learning with her, he said sharply. Minato blinked at the man. He was surprised that someone as stubborn as the man appeared to be more insistent on having Minato learn under him after Minato showed him up. It was interesting to say the least. I think Minato could also work well with the heavy attacks of flame breathing. His attacks are devastating and that physical strength is well matched. Shinjiro spoke from the side, his form lining up with Minato's side as he stubbornly crossed his arms. His son is already friends with Kyojuro, Shinjiro says like it finalizes everything. Minato looks between the three men and realizes all of them are stubbornly insistent he learns their breathing styles. How about I just learn all of them? You said that I could possibly form my own style, and honestly, I do not think one form suits me entirely. Name of my technique aside, I do have a rounded arsenal and I would not be against Naruto making more friends his age, Minato comments from the side. He tries to see all the pros of the situation and learning all of these varying techniques wouldn't be bad. The three heads turn to him, but already Minato can see that they are thinking over his idea. Shinjiro's lips form a thin line, but he nods despite his obvious displeasure with Minato's line of thinking. Minato isn't sure what to think of that but tacks it down to the man wanting to learn shinobi techniques. That could work. You would have to transport yourself between our homes though, Sakanji begins but is cut off when Shinjiro speaks up. He can travel within 10 miles just using that Thunder God technique of his. As long as he places a marker, he will be fine hopping between our estates, Shinjiro informs them. Jigoro and Sakanji both eye him again, this time with enough focused intent that Minato goes on edge and eyes them right back. They look back to Shinjiro after a moment, but Minato keeps his gaze on them as he feels eyes pricking at the back of his head. They gathered an audience unintentionally as the Kikuchi slipped around the previous battlefield, eyeing them warily. Minato offers small smiles and a gentle countenance to help them calm down and feel safe. It works for the most part as the area comes to life gain. Minato had hardly noticed how quiet it was until the Kikuchi went back to work. I think I would not mind learning from all of you. Even so, you can discuss this further amongst yourselves. Oyakata asked to see me, so I will be heading to greet him, Minato says with a small smile directed at the three Hashira. They look wary but Shinjiro nods at him and lets him go. Minato turns and heads back to the estate and finds two Kikuchi waiting for him when he enters the courtyard. They guide him up onto the porch and take his shoes. They lead him down the hall and around a series of maze-like hallways before he comes to a door that they knock on. It opens to reveal the young boy from before who gestures Minato inside. Oyakata sits at the table and calls him over. Minato takes a seat, feeling odd and out of place in the quaint room with white linen and soft mats. He looks at the tea and the warm haze from before melts around him peacefully. I'm pleased you could join me again, Namikaze-san, Oyakata states. Minato hums, not used to the formality after months without it. He shares as much with Oyakata and the man laughs softly at him. Oh my, I suppose it would be all right if I just call you Minato then? Oyakata asks as his lips twitch into a smile. Minato can't help but mimic the feeling. His chest feels lighter for some reason. I would not mind that, he says instead of dwelling on the feeling. He takes some tea and gives it a cursory once over before he takes a sip. Oyakata tilts his head and sips his tea as they sit in silence. His eyes fall shut despite the fact they cannot see. Minato watches before his attention shifts over to the young boy still standing by the door Minato entered. Is he allowed to come and sit? Minato asks, glancing over to the man the Hashira call master. The man hums and reaches toward the boy. Kagaya, come, join us. I believe this will be good for you as well, Oyakata says. Kagaya gives Minato a small smile as he shuffles over to the man's side. He settles next to him gracefully but is soon tugged against the man's side in a soft and sweet hug. Minato relaxes a fraction at the gesture. I wanted to talk to you alone, Minato, not because I had anything nefarious planned, but because I felt that some things were better left unspoken in certain company. Oyakata finally speaks as he sets his tea down. Minato looks at him and sets his tea down as well, figuring this conversation will be a heavy one. Oyakata raises his eyes to Minato's, staring into the blue orbs despite the fact the man could not see him. He met his gaze evenly and offered a sad smile. The demon sealed inside of you, is it a danger to anyone? He asked calmly. Minato froze, eyes wide while the fingers still wrapped around his cup flexed momentarily. His eyes shifted to the man in shock as he tried to formulate a response. For the life of him, Minato could not comprehend how this man would know about the Kyuubi. Chapter 10. Words from a devil, whispers from the past, hand of a friend. Minato eyed Oyakata warily as he felt his chakra rolling below his skin. He didn't want to have to use it, but honestly, the man's intuition and knowledge set him on edge. I asked if the demon sealed in you is, Oyakata tried to say again. But Minato held his hand up as he narrowed his gaze on the man. There was a spark below the surface, the Kyuubi waking at his irritation. Let me talk to him, the Kyuubi murmured in Minato's mind. Minato felt a lump form in his throat, thought of Naruto, of the questions and the possibility that he may have just placed them in danger if the demon slayers see the Kyuubi as a demon. And he lets out a heavy breath. He'd trust the Kyuubi in this. He was better at reading others than Minato anyway. There was still that warmth settled in the air around Oyakata that Minato could blame for his faulty reasoning if everything went to hell. He pulled on his courage, on the voice that sounded so much like Kushina in his head that told him plans only worked when the world did as you expected. How about you ask him yourself? Minato tells the man, and before Oyakata can say anything, Minato spawns a clone. This clone isn't like the others. This one is spawned using only the Kyuubi's chakra with a touch of a seal in place to keep him steady. This one spawns with dark red hair and red eyes with slit pupils as it sits with one leg brought over the other, its arms wrapped around the knee calmly. It's been some time since you've let me out, Yondaime. You must not want to explain yourself. The Kyuubi speaks, flashing fanged teeth formed in Minato's normally demure smile. It's still unsettling to see the form the Kyuubi takes when he controls Minato's clones like this, but the Hokage was used to it. Former Yondaime. You asked, and I'm sure Oyakata-san could use a full explanation, Minato said with an incline of his head. He shifted his gaze between the imposing figure of the Kyuubi and Oyakata. To his surprise, Oyakata did not seem unsettled, merely surprised. So, you do have a demonic presence within you. I had felt it before, but I was not sure I was correct. Do you go by a name? Oyakata asks as he gestures to the Kyuubi. The Kyuubi flashes the fanged grin at him, though it is mostly harmless and instead speaks of interest. Not one I like to give to flesh bags, but well, this one has grown on me. My name is Kurama. Kurama speaks as he looks at Minato purposely. Minato's eyes widen a fraction and his surprise flickers through the seal. He gets a heavy dose of amusement and bitter acceptance. The blonde nods to his tenant and ponders the change. The Kyuubi did not give him a name the last time he had asked. Then again, that was before dimension hopping and doing everything to save his son, which just so happened to include saving the Kyuubi. The seal between them had to be broken, and now where walls used to be there was only a settling agreement to aid one another. Minato hadn't asked again because he had figured the Kyuubi would tell him when he became comfortable. He also hadn't had time after the fall of Konoha, the death of Kushina, and the running that came after. It felt nice to be trusted with something like this, even if the circumstances were not the best. Oyakata nods, his smile turning soft as he holds his son to his side. Kurama, I see. So, you live within Minato? He asks and looks between them. Kurama hums and his voice was much deeper and guttural than Minato's. In all but practice, yes. The idiot hardly keeps me locked up. I find his company pleasant enough, so I have remained there. Before you ask, I don't feed on people either. The idiot would have a heart attack if I did. Kurama says, and his lips twitch again as he taps a clawed finger on the table. Minato twists sharply at him at his tone and opens his mouth to argue but shuts up when given a side-eye. I feed more on negative emotions, but I don't need to even in this realm. The idiot and I thrive on the natural energy in the world that he uses in his techniques. I am made of this energy, Kurama says and holds out his palm. The same vortex Minato had graded before forms, but this time it's black and holds a ratio of yin to yang chakra that balances it completely. Kurama lets it dissipate after Oyakata gets a good look. My being is made of that same energy, though I am currently split in half. I take it you sensed me when you approached the idiot earlier? Kurama asks. Oyakata nods and glances down at his son before shifting his head to stare blankly ahead of them. Indeed, I did. I was surprised because this energy feels akin to the demons that we hunt, and yet yours feels so much calmer. I would like to believe that we have figured demons out by now, but, well, no one has truly studied them in over a century. Some demons abstain from eating others, but none quite like what you are saying, Oyakata says as he ponders the information. Kurama nods but says nothing else. He leans back and leaves Minato to formulate his response. He had never really thought they would end up doing this, but Minato is learning that the demon slayers aren't as well equipped as he thought, and maybe while he was benefiting from what upper hands they had on the demons, he could help them too. I have a working theory on demons in this world, Minato says as his face shifts into a bittersweet smile. He was making a choice, and maybe it was the warmth that Oyakata exuded, maybe it was the fact Kurama hadn't been afraid to showcase himself, but he felt like he could trust the man. Oyakata's eyes close and he nods, offering Minato an encouraging smile. You don't have to tell me more, but I would appreciate any help my children and I could get. They fight demons so everyone can survive, and I just want what is best for them, Oyakata murmurs. Minato thinks of Konoha. He thinks of the last day he was there when Akatsuki attacked and came for Naruto. He thinks of the masked figure who was his student before he changed and twisted into something else. He thinks of the people who threw themselves into the line of fire so he could survive, and his heart twists so hard he thinks it might break. Kurama settles his clawed hand on Minato's knee. His eyes are on him, carefully assessing. Genma, Raida, Iwashi, his guards who tried to give him more time. Kushina, Bawako, and so many more who stepped in to protect him when he was supposed to protect them. He thought of Fugaku's selfish desires that got his son killed, and thought of Shisui as the boy grabbed Naruto and ran. He thought of Obito's taunting as he prepared to remove Kurama from Minato and found himself fighting against so much more. Minato was betrayed by one of his closest friends, yes, but he was also saved by so many more who dwelled in the village he swore to keep safe. Minato held the Kyuubi at bay and protected as many as he could even when it cost him everything. He had chosen to finally be selfish after Kushina begged him to. He chose to be selfish after Makoto swore at him and challenged him to stay alive for his son. He chose to be selfish after Kakashi and his guards teamed up to send him far away. He chose to be selfish when he held his son, called on the Kyuubi's chakra, and activated Flying Thunder God with no clear destination in mind other than to get away. A settling breath, heavy and filled with enough tension that the mere exhale shakes Minato down to his core. He lets it go and then faces Oyakata with a sad smile. I fled my duties to my people, so I don't think I have much room to talk, but I understand the need to protect those who would do anything to protect others. He tells Oyakata and Oyakata matches his smile. I'll tell you as much as I feel like I can, as much as will be helpful, Minato says and then begins to explain what he can. Oyakata doesn't ask about his past. Minato tells him anyway because some things need to be explained for the rest to make sense. He doesn't interrupt as Minato tells him how he ended up here in this world, but he does reach out to offer Minato his hand in condolence. Kurama watches him, says nothing, and merely observes. His unwavering gaze and his grip on Minato's leg gives Minato enough grounding that he can get through it without losing himself. Minato dispels Kurama when Oyakata turns in for the night. He leaves his home to find the skies dark and stars winking in and outs of existence over his head. He looks up and sees the moon. There is a slight breeze but he pays it no mind as he looks up at the sky. There's an echo of his sky there, underlying the stars that twinkle and shine with a light that used to be mimicked in Minato's eyes. The night his village was destroyed, the sky of his home was like this. Itachi and Shisui had come to Minato with news of a planned coup d'etat from the Uchiha. Makoto had followed them and warned Minato to flee. He didn't listen. The Akatsuki attacked and Fugaku used the opportunity, one he had initialized, to take control of the upper ranks Konoha. When all was said and done, Minato didn't have much of a home left and only those who truly cared for him staying at his side. Kushina died protecting him just the same as the rest. He never saw what happened to Kakashi or his guards. He never saw because they had pushed him into the Flying Thunder God formation and told him to run. Against Obito though? Against the mastermind who had freed the Kyuubi originally and without Minato's liberal use of Flying Thunder God. Minato didn't want to doubt them, but he knew their skill level. He didn't think they were long to join Kushina on her deathbed. Minato, you alright? A gruff voice calls from the other side of the walkway. Minato doesn't need to look to know that Shinjiro is watching him. He looks at the stars in silence for a moment more before he looks back at the man. I'm tired, Shinjiro. I think I would like to go home now, he says, ignoring the twinge in his chest at the word. Home to him is no longer space, a house, or even a building. Home is Naruto. Shinjiro nods, his eyes assessing the man before he offers his hand. Then let's get going. It's late and we can get there quick enough, he tells him. Minato huffs and walks over. He takes the hand but winks at Shinjiro as he feels the edge of his mischievous nature flaring to life. Who said we were going to walk? If you wanted to learn shinobi techniques, here's a crash course in the Flying Thunder God, he says, and they vanish in a yellow flash. They appear in the middle of a room at the Rengoku estate. Kyojuro jumps up from the table when they flicker into place and Ruka jumps in her seat. Minato barely has time to let out his laughter as Shinjiro doubles over in a groan that most assuredly is motion sickness. He laughs as a blur of yellow tackles him from his spot. He braces but doesn't care as Naruto clambers over him and calls out. Kyojuro and Ruka are looking at them in shock. Shinjiro is still clutching his stomach and his head, but Minato is laughing and crying. Naruto clings to him as Minato casts a glance at Shinjiro and offers the man a smile. "Oops, should have warned you, it's a lot to get used to," he says, and then goes right back to laughter. Shinjiro sighs as he settles in for the night. The eventful dinner still has him spinning because of the whirlwind movement that he experienced through Minato. He has no idea how the man can use his technique so readily. "You are deep in thought," Ruka murmurs as she shifts next to him. He makes room and opens his arm so she can lean on his side. Shinjiro holds her close and nods as he tucks his chin into her hair. "What do you think of Minato?" he asks her. After explaining the technique Minato used to his shocked wife and Kyojuro, Shinjiro had to sit down to quell the spinning in his head and the twisting in his gut. Minato, after recovering from his fit of laughter, offered to make him some tea as he explained some side effects of his technique. Ruka hums against his side, her fingers playing with the edge of his yukata. "He's broken. I don't think he has had anything other than Naruto for some time." He speaks of his wife with bitter sweetness. He's incredibly kind and doesn't mind showing things to Kyojuro, and there are times that he looks at you and laughs, but it's hardly genuine. Tonight he laughed, and for once he wasn't hiding behind a fake smile. "He's kinda and caring but hurt," Ruka voices to him as she shifts to look up at her husband. Shinjiro looks at his wife, meets her gaze, and nods. "He's strong too. He fought Jigoro and he would have won if Sakanji hadn't called the fight," Shinjiro informs her. Ruka's eyes widen a fraction. Despite not being a demon slayer, she had met the other Hashira and knows their strength. Jigoro was hardly a pushover, and he had been a Hashira for some time at that point. He and Sakanji were much older than Shinjiro. Both men were 2 years away from their 50th birthdays, even if they were some of the strongest slayers alive. They had been Hashira for half their lives at this point. Are they going to try and take him under their wings? Ruka asks him. Shinjiro grimaces and huffs, feeling annoyance crop up. He didn't want the other two Hashira to take offense with Minato, yes, but he also didn't want them to try and butt in. Minato could learn flame breathing, he didn't need to go to either of those geezers. Ruka gives him a knowing look. Minato could use more friends than just you, Shinjiro. I don't think he has many, to begin with. Jigoro and Sakanji would be excellent friends. They also have other children they are teaching, correct? Naruto needs other friends his age. Kyojuro is an excellent friend, but he can only do so much, Ruka told him, ever his voice of reason. Shinjiro wanted to deny it, but he knew she was right. He was being stubborn because he had been the one to find Minato in the first place, and he wanted. Well, he wanted to make sure Minato no longer had to hide behind that smile of his. He couldn't imagine losing Ruka, knew it would likely destroy him. The thought of Minato suffering alone and still managing to love his son as much as he did made Shinjiro's chest ache. Yes. Jigoro found the girl, Hiroko, a few months ago. She's a year older than Kyojiro. Sakanji has those 2 boys he is training and the one girl who is ready to go to final selection even though she's too young. Shinjiro agreed with her. He thought of the other children, 2 of whom he had met in person and the 2 boys he had only heard of in writing. Hiroko was a quiet girl who kept mostly to herself but showed promise with thunder breathing. Jigoro had been worried because of the girl's reaction to the lightning and tried to convince her to learn flame breathing with Shinjiro, but she would hardly have anything to do with the suggestion. Sakonji's student, a young girl who wasn't much older than Kyojiro, was much the same when he last met her. She was a tiny thing with far too much flexibility. She had begged to be put in the next round of final selections in a month. Shinjiro didn't agree, but Sakonji was more stubborn than even Jigoro, and if the girl had convinced him, then perhaps he was right. I think that you know what needs to be done. Regardless of who trains Minato or who gives him a home. Ruka broke him from his thoughts. Her fingers splayed over his chest while her other hand settled on her stomach. Senjiro thinks so too, she says as she gazes lovingly at her stomach. Shinjiro watches her and then and there he knows that he made the best choice when it came to his wife. He leans in and captures her in a kiss as his hand splays over her own. She leans close and he relishes the calm as Senjiro chooses that moment to kick their joined hands. If Shinjiro can give Minato an ounce of the calm his family brings him, then he will. Chapter 11. The roar of clandestine meetings. Minato wakes to the feeling of 2 heads against his sides. At first, he thinks of Kushina, but as he comes to his senses the thought is calmly dismissed. His eyes open as he looks down to find 2 tufts of blonde hair curled at his sides. Naruto and Kyojiro both rest, their breathing calm and even against him. He feels a smile rise as he looks at both boys. He was glad that Kyojiro took such a liking to Naruto. It helped he was also comfortable with Minato. "Looks like you're stuck," a voice calls from the doorway. Minato looks up to see Shinjiro standing there in uniform. He eyes his son fondly and Minato feels something twinge in his chest. He isn't quite sure what the feeling is. Jigoro wanted to see if you'd come to his place. "I suppose it may take some time if you don't want to wake the boys," Shinjiro tells him as he gazes at the pile. Minato shakes his head and glances to the side where a pile of blankets rests. His chakra rises and then he flickers. The blankets pool in his place and the boys shift to hold onto them instead as Minato stands next to Shinjiro. He grins at Shinjiro's surprised expression before he heads to grab some clothes. He grabs his scroll instead and walks out of the room. Shinjiro closes the screen behind him and eyes the scroll. "Naruto will have to wake up soon if you want him to meet Hiroko," Shinjiro tells him. Minato nods and unseals a set of clothes. These are more along the lines of his shinobi clothing. Shinjiro eyes them carefully before he sighs. "Come on, let's grab something warmer from storage. I have some of my old uniforms." He grabs Minato's collar before he can try to walk away. Wait, these are fine." Minato tries to get out of the hold but finds that Shinjiro is incredibly strong. The Hashira hardly bats an eye and Minato relaxes as he realizes that he can only get free if he hurts his host. He settles and follows until they arrive at a closet near Shinjiro's room. Shinjiro opens it and sifts through the articles until he pulls out a uniform like his own that has several mended tears and cuts. They are hardly noticeable, but it is obvious that the uniform was well used. Minato takes it and offers a smile. "Thanks. I'll put it on and then I can wake Naruto," he says and heads into a spare room to get dressed. He watches as Shinjiro shakes his head and goes to the kitchen to grab some pre-made meals for them to take with them. Minato steps into the room and holds up the uniform. It's a set of black hakama pants and a buttoned black top. There's a white belt and a white undershirt. Shinjiro didn't include footwear, but Minato rather likes his style from the elemental nations. He slips his black shirt from Konoha on under the uniform instead of the white shirt, tugging the black uniform closed over top. He paused as he looked at the uniform. It was different from the flak jacket he was used to and made of durable material. He tested its strength and found that he couldn't tear the fabric without the use of chakra. The hakama pants were long, but Minato wrapped them the same way he normally did his own. He added his kunai pouch to the belt and stored his scrolls at his sides. He held his clothing scroll in his hands as he pondered adding one more item to his arsenal. He unsealed the cloak, allowing the white fabric to drop into his arms. He held it there, looking over the flames at the bottom and the carefully sewn title on the back. He brushed his fingers over the surface of the fabric as something settled in his chest. He hadn't worn his cloak since he had dropped into this world. He hadn't wanted to be identified by anyone in case Akatsuki came after him again. "Hokage, Fire Shadow." A voice calls and jolts Minato as he looks behind him at Shinjiro. Shinjiro steps away from the open door and around to Minato's side. His eyes are scanning the cloak as he reads the text. "A title gifted to me," Minato murmurs, and he carefully folds the fabric before hanging it over his arm. Shinjiro pauses, glancing up at him. Minato has a sad smile on his face again. It fades as soon as he notices Shinjiro's gaze and he offers a kind smile. "You led people, didn't you?" he asks quietly. Minato tenses next to him and his mouth snaps shut. His eyes waver and he looks back at the fabric. "Yes, a village. I was their Hokage, their leader," he finally offers. Shinjiro nods but doesn't press for more information. Instead, he takes Minato by his shoulder and leads him out of the room. They enter the hall and Minato instinctively braces for Naruto as the kid runs into his leg. He's bright and happy as the ambient warmth around him spreads around his father too. Minato's smile returns, but this time it is much more genuine. He leans down and murmurs to Naruto quietly. The kid is quickly distracted by the coat and he reaches for it. Minato lets him, guiding it around his shoulders with a quiet laugh. Naruto starts to bounce around with the large heap of fabric on his shoulders, spinning around and dashing back to Minato's room so he can change into clothes for the day. He takes the cloak with him and Minato says nothing. Shinjiro's smile softens on them and he clears his throat before dragging Minato into the kitchen to grab a small bite to eat. There is more shuffling several minutes later as Naruto runs out of the hall with Kyojuro in tow. The boy looks tired but is dressed for the day. Normally Shinjiro would leave Kyojuro to look after Ruka, but today the master's wife had graciously offered to come and see her. Shinjiro felt safe leaving the two women to converse, especially since the young master, Kaguya, would be joining his mother. "Kyojuro, make sure to eat something. We are going to practice running today, so be prepared," Shinjiro informs his son. Kyojuro nods and rushes to find suitable sustenance. Naruto rushes to his dad and starts to murmur in loud whispers to him. Minato listens in with a gentle smile. "To-san, are we going to use the trees?" Naruto asks excitedly. Minato nods and Naruto grins happily. He rushes to Kyojuro to gush to him about how cool the activity is while Minato and Shinjiro wait for them to get some food in their system. When the boys were ready, they follow the adults outside the house. Naruto ends up on Minato's back while Shinjiro makes sure Kyojuro is ready before they begin their trek to Jigero's home. His home is normally a day's travel both ways from the Rengoku estate, but considering that Minato had offered to take them all back instantly, the trip was easily cut in half. Shinjiro appreciated the help because of Ruka's condition and it made him much more agreeable to going along with Jigero's demands. Shinjiro took the lead and once he had found a pace suited for Kyojuro, he led Minato and his son down the path to the estate. They had left before the sun rose in the sky with their hair flickering past the trees like flames. Shinjiro shone the brightest with his Haori sailing behind him. Naruto rambled the whole way to Jigero's home. Minato kept him occupied and Kyojuro laughed more than once from their silly gestures. Shinjiro found himself relaxing more than before as they continued their journey. They reached Jigero's home without trouble around midday. Shinjiro had been there before with Kyojuro, but Kyojuro had yet to meet the newest member of the home. "Gigi, there are visitors." A voice calls from the yard as they slow down and approach the home. The voice is distinctly young and feminine as a figure shows itself. It's a young girl, about Kyojuru's age if not older. She is dressed in men's clothing and looks to have just finished training. Her long platinum blonde hair is bound into a ponytail and when she turns her head to them, Minato catches her green eyes. He feels surprise surge through him. The girl looks very similar to the Yamanaka clan and were it not for her darker skin, Minato would mistake her for one. She held herself like one of them, cool and confident as she wandered over. "Shinjiro-san, it's nice to see you again," the girl says as she inclines her head. Her eyes flit from Kyojuro to Minato and then to where Naruto sits on his shoulders. She gives a small wave to them. Kyojuro grins at her and Naruto shifts in Minato's grip. Minato lets the boy drop and stifles a laugh as he runs up to the new girl and grins brightly at her. "I'm Naruto. What's your name?" he asks. The girl looks surprised at this and stutters as she tries to gather herself. Kyojuro comes up to her next and grabs Naruto's hand as he smiles at her just as brightly. She almost looks blinded by the combined blondes. "I'm Kyojuro." Quote. The girl flushes but nods her head at them as she tries to hide her red face. "I'm Hiroko, it's a pleasure to meet you," she says quietly. Naruto laughs and reaches out to grab her hand. Minato steps closer and opens his mouth to stop Naruto but is struck when Hiroko abruptly shifts. Her posture changes and she settles as her body relaxes. It's almost like she is mirroring the boys. She looks at Naruto with a gentle gaze. Naruto begins to talk the girl's ear off with Kyojuro backing him up. She takes them in stride as she changes her tune and grows more comfortable with them. Her small smile grows into something more energetic the longer they talk. "Hiroko, I see you've met Minato and Shinjiro's sons. Minato, welcome to my home. Hiroko, how about you show the boys around? Maybe go get some peaches from the orchard." Quote. Jigoro calls out. Hiroko's eyes spark and she nods sharply. Yes, Gigi. She calls, and then, almost like a war general, she gathers the boys and gets them to march after her with a cry for Peaches. Minato watches Naruto go as he shouts for Peaches. Naruto spares a glance back at him, but Minato nods to let him know it is okay. He immediately rushes ahead to meet up with Hiroko. Kyojuro does the same, but Shinjiro inclines his head. Once the three have rounded the house, Jigoro gestures for the other two to enter. He waits for them to remove their shoes and then leads him down the halls to the reception area. There are small signs of Hiroko in the area, mostly objects strewn about and accessibility items like a stool. There is a brush left to the side by a kimono slung over a chair, a box of ornamental objects, and a few wisteria incenses that make Minato's nose twitch. Forgive the smell, Hiroko is a Marichi and I would rather she be safe than have a demon somehow find her, Jigoro tells him when he notices his sensitivity. Minato's eyes widen a fraction as he sits next to the men. He had thought Marichi were rare, but maybe it was just a coincidence that the second demon slayer child Naruto would share his coveted blood. Shinjiro frowns, brow furrowing. I had forgotten about that. Well, maybe it is good that she is meeting Naruto, the flame Hashira murmurs. Jigoro huffs but nods and glances at Minato. I take it your boy is also a Marichi? Quote. Minato nods, eyes settling on his fingers momentarily as he remembers the way the demon had ignored him but gone after Naruto in reckless abandon. He didn't want to think of another child going through that situation. Suspected Marichi, but with the way the demons ignored myself and Minato when we attacked them, I'd say that it's heavily implied. Shinjiro corrects as he grabs some tea. He fills his cup and takes a small sip as Jigoro slides some to Minato. Minato takes the cup with a quiet word of thanks before the three settle into silence. Outside they can hear the three kids running around. Hiroko hardly speaks, but the other two make up for it with their excited shouts. Naruto is yelling something about a race and Kyojuro is trying to get Hiroko to agree to one. When she does, Naruto cheers. Jigoro huffs and grins. He winks at Shinjiro and drinks another sip of his tea. Abruptly there's a pulse, a haze of chakra that burns just under Minato's senses. He turns his head in shock and the cup hits the table with a clatter as Minato rises to his feet. Jigoro glances at him and soon the two other Hashira follow as Minato steps outside. They come to the sight of Naruto taking off after the other two children. Hiroko immediately pulls ahead as sparks work their way up her legs. She laughs and leaves the dust in her wake. Kyojuro attempts to keep up, but the most he can manage is to barely get behind her before she picks up speed. She spins as she nears a tree they must have designated as their stopping point. She's smiling at the others even as she skids to a stop. Lightning sparks at her feet and Minato feels it again. Chakra, a haze over her feet that slowly dwindles as Kyojuro and Naruto rush to get second place. Kyojuro is laughing too hard and falls over, thus allowing Naruto to pull ahead with a victorious cry. Minato? Shinjiro asks as Minato stares at the little girl currently bent next to Kyojuro with a hand offered to help him up. He's too busy laughing, and even when he grabs her arm he ends up dragging her down with him. Naruto lets out a war cry and tumbles over them both and their laughter increases in volume again. Chakra. She just used chakra, Minato murmurs in shock. In the 6 months that Minato had lived in this world, there had been very few people with the capability of utilizing chakra. Among the 5 he could recall, 3 were demons, 1 was his son, and the other was Shinjiro. Shinjiro's reserves were just above a civilian shinobi's in the academy though and didn't really count. This girl had the same amount as the average academy student when she wasn't even a teenager. There was an obvious lightning affinity at work that the girl could hardly control. Shinjiro steps next to him and then looks over to Jigoro. Jigoro is looking between Minato and his student with a decidedly curious expression. "Chakra?" Jigoro asks. Minato nods and sighs. "It's the energy that I use to do my techniques. Most people here don't have the ability to use it like I do because their reserves, or the amount inside of them, aren't large enough to be used. Hiroko has more than Shinjiro and used it unconsciously when she ran." Jigoro nods and his hand rises to his chin as he strokes his goatee. "Well, if this chakra is supposedly causing her to use lightning in a different way than our breathing styles, then that would explain why she has trouble using lightning breathing," Jigoro tells him. Hiroko pauses from her spot beside the boys. She sat up with Naruto and settled on top of Kyojuro. She looks at them and her eyes meet Jigoro's. He inclines his head and makes a gesture with his hands. She hops to her feet without using her arms, something that makes Minato's eyes widen a fraction. She then twists around the bundle efficiently and Lopez over to them. "Yes, Gigi?" Hiroko asks as her eyes shift between him and Minato. "Could you show Minato here your first form?" He's curious about something, Jigoro asks. The girl nods even if she feels odd. She shifts in front of the 3 adults, faces out to the field, and then her form takes shape as Minato watches her perform the same technique he watched Jigoro use on him the day before. She's fast but not nearly as fast as her teacher. Minato sees each movement and the flicker of lightning over her limbs as she jolts and swipes with an imaginary blade. When she comes to a halt she winces and lets go of a heavy breath, losing concentration with her breathing. She turns to Jigoro as the man praises and corrects her form. Something lights up in her eyes and she nods to the man before her gaze shifts to Minato. Minato saw it again, the flicker of chakra. This time the girl had used it in her limbs and her chest. It welled up and exploded outward in pulses timed to each jagged snap in her movement. Minato recognizes the snapping formations of lightning well enough because he had once done the same thing when he was just learning tree climbing from Jiraiya. His eyes scan the girl and he makes a choice. He kneels and holds his hand to her. He smiles gently as he calls, "Hiroko, would you take my hand? I want to see something, but if you don't want to." Minato hardly gets halfway through his sentence when Hiroko places her hand in his own. Her eyes are narrowed on him. The moment that her fingers grazed his palm there was a spark. Blue lightning danced over his palm while yellow lightning sparked on her fingertips. Hiroko gasped in shock and her eyes darted up to his. Minato's gaze softened on her as he let out a heavy breath. "You have a lightning affinity. It's strong too. That's why you keep creating lightning when you move," he tells her. Jigoro murmurs with Shinjiro behind them. Kyojuro and Naruto approach the group again and Kyojuro is watching the flickering pulses of light dancing between Minato and Hiroko's hands. Naruto's eyes brighten as he sees the display of chakra. "To-san, it's like the chains," he says and rushes to his father. Minato nods and holds out his other arm to catch the boy so he doesn't run into their hands. Naruto's blue eyes reflect the sparkling light as it forms arcs in Minato's palm. Hiroko is eyeing the hand in just as much wonder, and she almost looks excited at the prospect of understanding what was happening with her. She uses chakra for that? Kyojuro asks as he draws closer. Minato nods and smiles at the boy. He extends his senses, takes in the boy, and chuckles. You have a little bit in you too, probably the same amount as your father. Kyojuro's eyes brighten considerably. Minato offers him his other hand and Kyojuro's brow furrows, but he lays his hand over the hand as Hiroko did. It's small, but a haze works over their fingers as the air grows increasingly warm. It's much more subtle than with a lightning affinity, but Minato can tell that Kyojuro also has a strong affinity, and his is for fire. Well, seems like we won't be the only ones teaching you things, pretty boy. Jigoro speaks from behind him. Minato's brow twitches and he pulls back from the kids before he can get truly annoyed. He glances at Jigoro and grins in a way that is reminiscent of his wife. The grin is all teeth and it goes from being friendly to deadly instantly. Jigoro tenses under the smile as Minato reaches out with his chakra. He flickers into place behind the old man and sweeps his feet out from under him. To Jigoro's credit, the man catches himself and gets back on his feet with ease, but he still turns to Minato in shock. Minato ignores the Thunder Hashira as he listens to Naruto tell Kyojuro and Hiroko about chakra techniques that he knows, which admittedly, is a lot. Jigoro sputters and Shinjiro chuckles as Hiroko lets out a light laugh. Kyojuro looks excited and completely missed Jigoro's stumbling because he was too interested in what Naruto was saying. Minato looks over them and smiles gently, his heart feeling light. He hadn't thought that he would find anyone with chakra in them, but maybe they did exist outside of demons here. He would just have to meet more people to find out. They settle in for more tea after realizing Hiroko and Kyojuro contained fragments of chakra within them. Jigoro left the door open, and even with the chill air, it was welcome so they could watch the kids closely. Hiroko was trying to show the others how to do the splits. Naruto managed to do his splits long ways while Kyojuro struggled. Hiroko laughed and gently helped the boy stretch. She was incredibly flexible and agile for her age. Hiroko's mother traveled with a group of performers. She's half Japanese, though I'm unsure of who her father was. Her mother's group was attacked by a demon and she was one of the only survivors, Jigoro tells Minato. Shinjiro nods, having been aware of the girl's story prior. Hiroko is hiding her laughter behind her hand as Kyojuro attempts to do a backbend and ends up in a heap of limbs. Naruto piles on top of him with a cry of victory, and Hiroko barely gets out another string of laughter before Kyojuro pulls her ankle and she ends up toppling on the heap as well. Naruto scrambles to get on top as the two slayers in training maneuver carefully so they don't hurt anyone. Minato inclines his head as his eyes soften. Even so, an ache forms in his chest as he glances at Jigoro. You mentioned she was a Marichi? He says, knowing this topic would need to be addressed eventually. Jigoro nods and glances back at him before pouring them another round of tea. He takes a sip of his tea and once he swallows, he speaks over the edge of his cup. Yes. It was actually the reason her group was attacked. I would appreciate it if this stayed between us. But Hiroko acquired the attention of a powerful demon with her blood, and only her mother's quick thinking protected her. I don't want her to have to remember her mother the way she did. I had to kill her mother when she turned and find Hiroko before the demon did. Thankfully, the sun was beginning to rise after I laid her mother to rest. Minato freezes, eyes narrowing on Jigoro at the implication he had just made. He hadn't really thought about it or pieced things together, but well, it made an unhealthy amount of sense now that he thought about it. Turned? Her mother changed into a demon? Minato demands. Shinjiro pauses and makes a face as though he forgot something important. Jigoro glances between them and lets out a heavy sigh. They both set their tea down as Shinjiro begins the explain. Demons are created from one man, the progenitor of demons. He is the Demon King, Kibutsugi Muzan. His blood has the ability to create demons once it comes into contact with the blood of a human. His blood can also overpower them if they aren't strong enough or they get too much, Shinjiro says with a grimace. The demons shift and change, becoming monstrous and needed to consume other humans in order to live. Some live long enough to develop abilities called demon blood arts. Normally, only Muzan can turn people into demons, Jigoro says, and his eyes harden as he watches the kids. His eyes are on Hiroko now. The demons closest to Muzan, those who have been gifted an excess amount of his blood, have been rumored to do the same. These demons fall under the classifications of upper moon demons. There are 6 upper moons and 6 lower moons. We have fought and killed numerous lower moons, but an upper moon has not been recorded to be killed in centuries. Shinjiro finishes as his eyes stare blankly at the table. Minato's blood feels like ice as he listens. His hands clench around his cup as he feels a tremor run through him. His earlier predictions, well, if that doesn't sound like yin chakra poisoning, he doesn't know what does. Demonic features, and abilities unlike those around them that seem otherworldly. He desperately wants to learn more and study the fact, but well, he doesn't think he's there yet. His eyes shift between the two. You are suggesting that the powerful demon that came after her was an upper moon? He asks calmly, but his stomach is twisting in knots. He thinks about the demons that he faced with Shinjiro. They had been easy and simple to kill and deal with. They were still fast though, equipped with multiple features that aided in hunting humans. He couldn't imagine fighting another being, another demon with hundreds of years under them. It's not just suspicion. I witnessed her mother turn and I saw him demand to know where the child was. I arrived and only the sun coming up served to hinder his search for Hiroko. There were others in the group, Marichi like her, that did not survive, Jigoro tells Minato. Jigoro says the words plainly, but Minato can see the stress and tension in his shoulders. He can hear the underlying grief in Jigoro's words at the idea of all those who were ruthlessly slaughtered by this demon. He looks up at Minato and his eyes shine from unshed tears. He bore a pretty countenance, blonde hair, and frightening eyes that glimmered in prismatic rays. I never want to see his face again because, for all of his beauty, he was covered in blood and gore. Jigoro manages, the anger in his tone turning his voice into a rumble like thunder. Minato can feel the anger in the man. He can see just how troubled Jigoro is over what happened, and as he looks over at the kids he feels the same way. He may not have witnessed the atrocities demons have committed, but he had witnessed the atrocities of shinobi and knew that humans alone were cruel. Add in an unknown factor that seemed to bring out the mindless beasts in people's hearts? Well, Minato could fathom just how dangerous that would be. He thinks of Danzo, bastard of a snake that he was, and he can't help but compare the demons to Root. Made to kill and only kill, for the good of whatever their master wished. Demons prefer Marichi because of how much they accelerate their growth, correct? Has anyone figured out why that is? Minato asks. He doesn't want to continue down his line of thinking when Naruto is so close by and susceptible to his anger. Jigoro relaxes as the topic changes, rising to his feet as he murmurs about grabbing something stronger than tea. Shinjiro takes up the conversation, hoping to lighten the mood after the dire relay of information. Not really. Demon slayers haven't had much time to be more than fighters. Some have had theories, but very few of us live past adulthood, let alone as old as the current Hashira. It's not common, Shinjiro says and pours himself another cup of tea. He offers more to Minato, who takes it because it's better than mulling in his thoughts. Jigoro returns with a bottle labeled peach sake. He offers some to the others, but Minato declines. He doubts he could get drunk anyway, despite how nice the drink smells. Jigoro insists though, and soon Minato finds himself with a cup half full of sake. Jigoro and Shinjiro take measured sips of the drink, savoring the flavor. Minato takes a whiff before carefully drinking. He's pleased to find that the flavor isn't as bad as some of the stuff Jiraiya and Tsunade would shove into his hands when they were celebrating or mourning. He lets the heat of it settle in his stomach despite knowing that it won't do much more than give him a pleasant buzz even if he drank the whole bottle. He had several nights with Tsunade trying to get him drunk after the Kyuubi was sealed inside of him before she realized it was futile. I have some ideas, though most of them revolve around my expertise with chakra. In my home village, we had some doctors who discovered different blood types. These were based on factors within the body, and the different types of compounds within the blood and its separate parts. Some blood types are rarer than others and are determined based on the blood types of parents, Minato informs them. He hums and unseals a scroll, ignoring the shocked huff from Jigoro as he unseals his brushes and ink. He begins to lay them out, addressing the names of the different blood types. Blood carries several parts to it and can be separated into those parts. Among them are the protective cells that battle diseases, making up less than 1% of our blood, the cells that make our blood red and carry oxygen throughout our body, and the liquid portion that carries proteins needed by our bodies. Minato explains, recalling what he could from his days with Tsunade and Orochimaru. Tsunade wanted him to know as much as he could because he was Hokage and he needed to know just enough jargon to understand what she was telling him. He appreciated the effort more than ever now. Shinjiro and Jigoro were both eyeing him carefully. Neither of them wanted to interrupt, but they made sure to show they were listening to his words. Minato continued, I know that Naruto's blood type is one of the rarer ones, especially in our population. I'm curious if it is the same here. Less than 10% of my village shared his blood type. He can also receive blood from pretty much anyone as a transfusion, though I'm unsure if it is the same for your side of things. Jigoro hums. He takes another sip of his sake and inclines his head. I believe some Western doctors have conversed about that practice. I know that Marichi are incredibly rare for us, probably similar to your village's amount. They are mostly able to receive blood transfusions, but those with extremely intoxicating blood, such as Hiroko and a few other rare cases, can't. Minato nods as his brain works around the ideas. He maps out the 4 blood types Tsunade told him about. There were other factors, such as the presence or absence of several factors, but for general purposes, there were around 7 main classifications. She had mentioned that Naruto was among the rarest with a negative factor for his type. I'm guessing that Hiroko may be the same type as Naruto if what you are saying is correct, Minato says with a sigh. He wishes, not for the first time, that Tsunade was here. Even Orochimaru would be preferred for all that the man hated Minato. They had bonded enough for Orochimaru to settle with Minato being Hokage, so long as he was allowed to do research that was sanctioned by the Hokage. Shisui had even offered to let the man study his Sharingan, and that had led to interesting discoveries. He's grateful at least that he knows about Naruto's blood just in case something were to happen. He had to be careful because Naruto also had a surplus of yang chakra in his system, but he was cleared by Tsunade to donate blood for the boy. If his suspicions were correct, then he could also donate for Hiroko should anything happen. The girl didn't have Uzumaki or Jinchuriki healing like Minato and Naruto did. He was just planning ahead even though he never wanted the instance to occur. His skill in medical ninjutsu was incredibly limited. They stewed in silence for a little longer. The kids had grown quiet, so Minato looked outside. His heart stuttered in his chest when he didn't see them. He reached out, finding Naruto's seal just outside the property. It was going toward the orchard that Jigoro had gestured to when they arrived, so he calmed himself down. There was no need to worry. Except, his stomach turned. He felt awful and had no idea why. He looked down and took another drink as he tried to calm his nerves. He hoped that his feeling was wrong. Chapter 12. Faces of Ghosts. Naruto rather liked meeting new people. He had been scared going into this new world, but now he was excited. The demons terrified him, that much was true. He was scared of the odd creatures lurking in the dark and the way they begged for his blood. He didn't like being the target of their hungry eyes. The friends he was making made up for the terror. Kyojuro was nice, more so than even Naruto's Tusan. He was incredibly bright and friendly and would help Naruto even when Naruto should know how to do whatever task he was assigned. He had helped Naruto wash his hair when normally his Tusan was the one to do it. Naruto liked Kyojuro's hair a lot. It was just as bright as Naruto's, but its red hue drew his attention the most. It made him think of another with the hair, but he couldn't place their face. He knew they were important and they reminded him of ramen, oddly enough. Hiroko was also an interesting person. She was quiet when they first met, but Naruto could feel the kind soul hovering underneath her uncertainty. When she had warmed up to them, and it hadn't taken much, he had found her to be a good friend. Naruto didn't want to leave her behind even after spending just a few hours with the girl and learning that she and Kyojuro both had chakra. He ran, he played, and he kept to both of the older kids because they were. Well, Naruto wasn't sure. He just knew he liked them a lot. They were good friends. He wanted to keep being their friend even though Hiroko was 10 years old and Kyojuro was 9. They were older than him, but that didn't stop them from playing with him. Hiroko was training to be a demon slayer just like Kyojuro was. She was learning thunder breathing from her Gigi and Naruto found it so cool. Her movements reminded him of the way his Tusan moved and he wanted to learn so badly. His eyes snapped to the girl, taking her in. She looked both similar and different from a girl that Naruto had met when he was young. He tried to picture her, but it was hard. Normally his Tusan would remind him. He swore that she had the same color of hair, though the other girl's eyes were blue and not green. There was an inkling in his head of another girl with the other blonde, one with pink hair who often stuttered and was so afraid of him because of whose son he was. He wasn't sure if he'd ever met someone who acted like that. "Nay, Hiroko Ni-chan, how do you learn thunder breathing?" Naruto asks as his feet swing under him. The three kids had climbed up a peach tree to rest on one of the branches. Naruto is currently indulging himself in a peach just like the other two. Kyojuro keeps calling out delicious, and every so often his two friends join him. Naruto pretends not to notice how happy Kyojuro gets when Hiroko doesn't make fun of him for it. He can sense underlying sadness in Kyojuro the first time Hiroko pauses at his outburst, but it swells quickly into an abundance of happiness when she mimics him brightly. Hiroko looks at him, her green eyes flickering over his form. Naruto watches as she taps her chin thoughtfully and smiles gently at him. A single lock of her hair falls in her eyes and Naruto watches it because Hiroko put her hair into buns using needles and he finds it so cool that she can do that. She speaks before he can deviate from his earlier line of thought and ask about her hair instead. "You have to learn like I am, but you are really young. I don't think you could learn until you were our age. Even we are considered too young to be learning Naruto-kun," Hiroko says and hums as she finished her peach. She wipes the back of her mouth and then flips around. She's hanging upside down now, her eyes twinkling with mirth. Naruto has noticed that much like he and Kyojuro, Hiroko doesn't like staying in one place. She's always moving and she loves to do odd things like hang from branches, perform cartwheels, and stretch at odd angles that make Naruto worry she's going to hurt herself. Before they came to the orchard, she was showing Kyojuro how to do a handspring and a flip. It was really cool, but Naruto couldn't understand how she managed to get her body to do all sorts of cool moves. Kyojuro-kun and I are only learning this early because we aren't normal kids. Gigi told me that the Rengoku family has managed the Flame Hashira position ever since the founding of the Demon Slayer Corps. Isn't that right? Hiroko says as she looks at Kyojuro pointedly. Kyojuro nods and finished one of his peaches as he grins at Naruto. He takes a second to swallow before he is happily chattering about the topic. Tu-san is the current Flame Hashira, and Gigi was the one before him. His Tu-san was also the one before that, and even before that the Rengoku family held the title. Kyojuro tells him as his hair fluffs in pride. Naruto's eyes widen and shine as he thinks about it. It reminds him of something, but he has to furrow his brow to think about it. Tu-san said the same about the Uzumaki. Only they trained as seal masters. Naruto mumbles and puffs his cheeks out as he tries to remember more. He can only really remember the Uzumaki spiral though, as well as images of waves. He shakes his head and grins again. I'll just have to learn chakra then. Then, I can learn cool jutsu, and I can save you guys. Naruto cheers, pumping his fist in the air. If he hadn't been using chakra to stay steady on the branch he would have fallen off. Kyojuro grins next to him, reaching over to ruffle his hair. Hiroko giggles and she drops from her branch. Both of the boys watch with wide eyes as the girl does a neat flip and lands on her feet. She's been surprising them like that rather frequently. She had shown them earlier just how flexible she was, having been practicing since she could walk. She told them her mother was even more amazing when she used her aerial silks, whatever those were. Naruto had asked but Hiroko had failed to provide a good enough description other than flying, but with silk, and Kyojuro had never seen anything like it before so he couldn't help. I think that if you want to protect us, you'll grow strong enough to do it, Naruto-kun. Hiroko tells him calmly as she looks up at him. Her eyes are so soft and warm that Naruto has to pause as he looks down at her. He knows she means her words even without looking at the intent around her with his chakra. He knows because she says it with a genuine smile and her eyes shine just as fiercely. Kyojuro grins and laughs, the sound booming next to Naruto. Naruto joins in, feeling his cheeks warm at her subtle praise. He wasn't used to anyone praising him other than his 2 san, and it felt nice. He couldn't remember the last time that had happened. Slight tears are forming at the corners of his eyes as he sways and laughs. His chest feels so light. It's warm, even when there is a chill present in the air. Naruto laughs so much that he loses control of his chakra, and soon his laughter is replaced by a yelp and a flash of panic as he tumbles over the branch. Kyojuro reaches out, startled, and ends up grabbing him. He doesn't think it through and goes tumbling after him before he can grab onto his branch. Hiroko darts, a flicker of lightning at her heels. She grabs Naruto out of the air as Kyojuro lets go of him. Kyojuro flips neatly like Hiroko had done, landing without a problem as Hiroko stumbles and rolls as she lands with Naruto. She pulls her arms around his head and grunts as they hit the ground and roll. Hiroko. Kyojuro rushes over as worry overtakes his voice. Water washes up against Naruto's form and he shivers from how cold it is. His eyes open and go wide as she feels Hiroko shudder below him. She's already wet, having rolled from under the tree to the stream running through the orchard. The water is ice cold but thankfully not deep. She shivers and winces as she feels the water wash against her scraped skin. Naruto, are you alright? Hiroko asks him as soon as she comes to her senses. Naruto is too busy trying to frantically look her over and headbutts her chin. They both let out dual cries of pain and shift away from one another as Naruto frantically apologizes. They fall back into the water and Hiroko lets out a noise of pain as she leans back and her hand slips. Naruto winces, his neck hurting and his back burning with pain. He wants to call out for help, so he reaches for his necklace. Kyojuro is next to them in a second, offering his hand first to Naruto to help him from the riverbed. Once he gets him up, he reaches out to grab Hiroko. She hisses as he holds her wrist and lets out a cry when he tries to pull her up. Naruto looks over as his eyes shine with worry. Kyojuro has to reach down to get Hiroko's shoulder instead because her wrist won't cooperate. They manage to stand up, but now both Naruto and Hiroko are soaked in cold water. There's a chill in the air that makes things worse. Naruto reaches for his necklace and lets out a sound of shock when he can't find it. He was going to call for his 2san, since he knew the man would come, only for his necklace to not be on him. He frantically looks around to try and find it. He knows he can't lose it, and honestly, he's in pain and just wants to help when he caused so much trouble and got Hiroko hurt. Naruto, hey, calm down. Kyojuro tries but doesn't get through as Naruto stumbles and begins to rifle through the leaves to find his necklace. Hiroko leans down to grab him, voicing her worries despite the fact that Naruto hurt her. They manage to turn him around to look at them, and it's then Naruto notices that Hiroko is bleeding. Her wrist, hands, arms, and legs are scraped enough that the skin is beading slightly with blood. He reaches out as his worry for his necklace shifts to her. He takes her wrist without thinking and she lets out a hiss. He jerks and only Kyojuro pulling up beside him keeps him from falling again. His eyes shift worriedly over the girl as Kyojuro gently cradles her hand and grabs some of the torn cloth from Hiroko's top. He starts to wrap it as Hiroko's eyes bead with tears. Hiroko nay, did I? Naruto trails off as he feels stress rise in his throat. Hiroko looks at him and she flashes him a small smile that masks the pain. Naruto can still feel it in her chakra. She inclines her head, giving him a wink even as she hides a wince as Kyojuro finishes a messy wrap of her wrist. Hey, it's okay. It happens. We should have been more careful. We should probably head back to the house. It's not a good idea to let our cuts stay open like this. Naruto nods even as his eyes fail to stray from her wrist. He's scared. Kyojuro looks at him and offers him a reassuring smile. Hey, Naruto, it's okay. We tend to get hurt, so it's okay. We know how to handle it. Quote. Naruto nods and both of them ruffle his hair. Hiroko lets her bad wrist hang at her side so she doesn't hurt it and turns to the house. She starts to tug them in that direction when Naruto remembers what he had been looking for. Wait, my necklace! He cries and jerks from their holds. Hiroko makes a sound of worry, but Kyojuro quickly informs her of what he's talking about. Okay, let's look for it quickly, Hiroko says, but she's clenching her hand nervously at her side. Her eyes are looking around for something, though Naruto isn't sure what. He quickly goes to find the necklace, leafing around on the cold ground. Kyojuro, we should really get back. I can't find my wisteria pouch, and Hiroko starts as they fail to find the necklace. The boy nods, but he's busy helping Naruto and misses just how stressed the girl sounds. Naruto catches sight of her eyes darting around, but she's not looking at the ground for the necklace like they are. She's looking into the woods that border the orchard. He feels unsettled, but he knows just how important the necklace is, so he continues searching. Naruto sees a glint of metal and lets out a cry of triumph and dives for it. Three things happen at once. A foot slams down onto the piece. A hand grabs Naruto's shoulder and jerks him back. Hiroko and Kyojuro shove him behind them as they take defensive stances. Naruto's eyes rise and he suddenly feels terror. Blank red eyes stare at them, a tilted head that jerks as the thing sniffs the air, salivating from its mouth. Hiroko curls her hand closer to her chest, wincing when she feels her scrapes touch her clothes. The demon's head jerks in her direction and it snarls. Little Marichi, you smell good, the thing says through fanged teeth, and its beady eyes narrow on Hiroko's cuts as it licks its lips. Her eyes widen and she looks just as terrified as Naruto feels. Naruto, run! Hiroko snaps at him and he jerks back from them as she and Kyojuro both dive to the side. He follows suit, feeling panic well up in him. He can't think straight as he sees the thing lunge for Hiroko. Hiroko goes down with a cry for Kyojuro to take him and run. Hiroko kicks the thing off with a flash of lightning. Naruto lets out a small sound when he sees more blood fly and Kyojuro grabs him. He begins to push back to the house but stills. Naruto can hardly focus and twists in time to see another pair of eyes. These are also red, but there are two sets of them on an elongated face with huge snapping teeth. He is sniffing just as much, his eyes drawn to the cut on Naruto's leg. Naruto cries out as Kyojuro grabs his wrist and starts to run the other way. Another Marichi, so tasty, so good, it cries as it goes after Naruto. He can hear its heavy breathing that sounds more like panting and he feels dread. The blonde is stumbling and can hardly focus past the terror in his soul. The demon is running behind them and it lunges. A twist, a leg pushing a small body up as the other whips around with increased ferocity. Their form whips around and spins in the air with a precise and practiced movement of a kick. There's a spark of lightning at the edge of the foot and the demon's chest makes an audible crack as it goes flying. Hiroko lands on the ground, her hair a mess of locks falling from her pinned bun as she turns and dashes for them. She grabs Naruto's hand with her uninjured one, pulling him up onto Kyojuro's shoulder. Kyojuro reacts quickly to hoist Naruto into a piggyback. They stumble as he gets used to the weight but push forward. Damn it, they're blocking the way back to Gigi. Hiroko snarls, her face drained of color as they bolt past the property line and further into the woods. The two demons push them further and further away as they run blindly to get away. Anytime they try to change directions, one of the two demons flickers around to that side to deter them. The trees offer just enough cover from the sun that they can keep up. They are herding them away from the house because they seem to be acutely aware of just who resides there. They keep their steps measured and grow closer and closer to the kids. Hiroko and Kyojuro are somehow taking measured breaths even as Naruto loses control of his. Naruto closes his eyes tightly and tries to control his panic. He thinks of his father, thinks of the flicker and the haze of warmth around him, and of what his father told him to do when he was in danger. There is a haze of light up ahead, through the dense copse of trees that had let the demons attack them before night. Hiroko points to the clearing and she grabs Kyojuro's shoulder to shove him into the dim light of the sun. She goes tumbling after them as a demon narrowly misses her neck with a swipe of its claws. The sun is just strong enough to stop the demons in their tracks as Hiroko scrambles to move next to them. The demons begin to circle the clearing, their eyes on the prize. One of them grins at them as it licks one of its claws. Little Marichi, the first one, speaks, its humanoid head angled at them. It salivates as it eyes them both and its partner moves next to it. Demon blood art, illusion cloak. The demon says and Hiroko lets out a horrible sound as the thing's face changes. It shifts, its body taking on a different appearance as the kids watch. Naruto watches the demons and even though he doesn't know whose face the demon now wears, he understands that they mean something to Hiroko. Her eyes flicker up and she lets out a sound of panic. She reaches for the figure but Kyojuro tugs her back. Hiroko, no, it's just the demon. He says and Hiroko stops trying to move even as she cries. Kyojuro holds her tightly and tugs Naruto close as well. He's doing a good job of staying calm as he looks over the tree line. His eyes flicker with panic. Naruto spares a glance up as he tries to control his breathing and sends out a flicker of his chakra. The sun is setting over the tops of the trees. Their daylight is limited. The demons have taken notice and are stalking around them still, inching closer as the light fades. The one with the woman's face is trying to call out to Hiroko, but Hiroko shifts to block Naruto from sight as Kyojuro shifts to his other side. They are shielding him from view even though Hiroko is bleeding and they have no way to fight. Hiroko had managed a few hits but those hardly did anything when the demons were regenerating in front of their eyes. Hiroko reaches up and tugs the needles from her hair with her good hand. She is shaking as she avoids looking at the demon and clenches her eyes closed to ignore its calls for her with a sickeningly sweet voice. She hands one to Kyojuro even though they are hardly large enough to do any damage. Gigi laced them with wisteria. It's all I have, Hiroko says in a broken tone, her eyes shaded over as she finally faces the demons. She makes another aborted sound as the demon with the woman's face meets her gaze. Hiroko, come on my darling, it's okay, come to me, she says and Hiroko makes another pained noise. Ka-san, she murmurs and her eyes look dark as they fill with more tears. Kyojuro tightens his grip on her arm even though she has gone slack against them. Kyojuro holds the needle in his other hand awkwardly. He hasn't trained with these weapons, but he is willing to try to do anything to protect her and Naruto in this situation. Naruto remains huddled behind them as his chakra continues to flare in panic. The sun is reaching the tops of the trees. The scene erupts into chaos. Jigoro is setting the dishes aside and talking about food when a villager frantically rushes to the house. They are dressed traditionally and they have a sword at their side. Jigoro. There's been a demon sighting in the town. The voice calls. Jigoro jerks up and the rest of the adults follow as the man comes to a stop. He's gasping and Jigoro doesn't let him catch his breath before he demands to know where the demon is. Taki, where? Quote. There are 3, one spotted at the south end and the other 2 down the road. They were accosting a carriage but couldn't follow because they got in the light. Suna sent me your way to let you know. Taki lets out a heavy breath and looks up as Jigoro goes still. His eyes shift to the orchard as worry shows through his features. Hiroko, he starts. Minato feels the pulse of chakra at the same time that Shinjiro and Jigoro go rigged. They quickly grab their swords. Jigoro flickers away and Minato spares a second to catch the spare katana in its sheath as Shinjiro tosses it to him. The flame Hashira meets his gaze and then Minato flickers away. He lands in a grove of trees to the smell of peaches and blood. He hears something below him and his eyes flicker down to take in the necklace he gave Naruto. It has a bit of blood on it and is next to 4 large indents that signify claws. A flicker forms as Jigoro drops next to him, his eyes darting around. There are signs of a scuffle. Burnt leaves litter the area and there is a rather large indent in a tree where something was kicked into it. The claw marks are between the house and a grouping of 3 sets of footprints that turn into 2 as one set seems to sink further. Minato hates the thought of what had just happened. He tries to grab for anything and finds, much to his anger, that he didn't mark anything else on Naruto. He's going to fix that as soon as he can. He grimaces and situates the blade Shinjiro gave him at his side. He looks over to Jigoro and sees Shinjiro arrive. Shinjiro drops to a knee and tugs up a scrap of fabric with blood. It's the same color as Hiroko's top. How did a demon get this far into the property? Jigoro rumbles, anger apparent in his eyes as he darts his gaze around the messy orchard. Shinjiro is looking around carefully, tilting his head to listen for any signs of the kids. He can see the path they started to take and begins walking in that direction. Minato goes to join him. He flares his chakra around to try and sense. And gets an arm to his wrist. His eyes dart to Jigoro as the man narrows his eyes on him. Can you not jump to them? He demands. Minato glares and jerks his hand from the man's grip. No. I didn't mark any of them personally. Naruto's necklace is marked but Minato holds the necklace up to show the problem with that matter. Jigoro glares at him and takes a step into his space. Why didn't you mark them? You showed you could, he tries to accuse. Minato rounds on him and feels a bead of the Kyuubi's chakra under his skin. It only lasts so long, I'm not going to mark some kid without cause either. You said this was safe. Minato tries. Jigoro straightens and rises. He opens his mouth to snark back at Minato but both men are cut off as Shinjiro steps between them. That's enough. Quote. His tone is firm as he glares at them both. Minato, can you sense Naruto? You mentioned the ability before. Shinjiro starts, his attention focused on the kids. He turns to Jigoro and starts to order him to go after the other demon near the town. Jigoro wants to argue but can't when Shinjiro points out that the other villagers don't have protection. Minato grits his teeth as Jigoro flickers away. He can sense a particular part of Naruto when he's not within Minato's range. Based on the lack of Naruto's signature popping into his field of view, Minato guesses his kid is much further than that. He closes his eyes because he has one option even if he doesn't like it. He pulses his chakra and feels the undercurrent of the Kyuubi as he wakes. There's a touch of his chakra added to the haze as he lets it swirl around him, searching for the mimicked signature, for Kurama's beacon of yang chakra. There's another pulse of chakra further along and Minato jerks his head in that direction. He doesn't stall and launches in its direction. He feels the haze of the Kyuubi's chakra settle around him in a thin layer as he locks onto the chakra and locates Naruto. There's annoyance rising in him as the innate nature of the Kyuubi's chakra pushes his negative emotions to the surface. He tries to breathe through them, but well, it's incredibly difficult in the circumstances. He's not just angry at Jigoro's accusations, he's livid. He doesn't want to stop moving because Minato is sure that if he does then he's going to end up doing something stupid. Minato debates whether killing the man he just met 2 days ago is really worth it. He debates as the edge of aggression stirs under his skin and burns furiously. He stews in that even as he feels another flicker of chakra that sends a terrified jolt down his spine. Minato sees Shinjiro join him in his peripheral and pushes his chakra into a shunshin. The next few jumps would be disorienting if he wasn't already used to Flying Thunder God. He uses that to his advantage as he distracts himself from the thoughts. He's a few months from the death of his wife and from his relocation to this strange world with figures and apparitions known as demons. He only met Shinjiro a few days ago, but even that doesn't stall him from his negative thoughts toward Jigoro and his brash actions. He has no patience to deal with this situation calmly when his son is in danger mere seconds away. There's a huge wave of chakra and dread pools in Minato's chest as he breaks into a clearing. He draws the blade Shinjiro had tossed at him and dives at a feminine figure. The figure jerks and twists and its arm gets cut off as Minato drops where it had been. It's not as mutated as the last one. Its eyes are trained past Minato though, focused instead on a figure in the clearing. Minato spares a glance and his throat dries up. Hiroko and Kyojuro are crouched next to Naruto. They both hold needles that Minato remembers Hiroko having in her hair. Her hair is now falling over her wide eyes, illuminated by golden light. Kyojuru's hair shines like fire as the burning hue of the golden chains in front of him lights the area. Brilliant golden chains are covering them, shielding them from another figure as it snarls and tries to reach them. It jerks around the makeshift dome and then dives to the side as Shinjiro arrives. Minato's eyes flick in front of him in time to kick the demon across the field. It twists with its red eyes fixated on Minato, and if it weren't for them then Minato would mistake the figure for a human. Back off, the Marichi are mine. The demon snarls at him and it whips its hands together and bows its head forward. Minato's eyes widen as he feels a haze of yin chakra building around the demon. Its form flickers and suddenly it's much more monstrous. Demon blood art, 1,000 needles. The demon snarls at him. Minato dives to the side to avoid the sudden onslaught of needles launched from the hunched-over demon's back. The demon whips a tail around from its back, And this one seems much more human-like than the last despite the spines on its back. Demon Blood Art, Poison Spray. The demon shouts and its tail opens up into a large and bulbous head that ejects a spray of purple mist. Minato backs away and out of the haze of mist without a second thought as he readies the blade in his grasp. Demon Blood Art, Illusion Cloak. Another voice calls from further away. Minato hears Shinjuru's rush of flames and ignores it as he avoids his demon lunging out from the poisonous smoke. Minato brings his blade up and slices off the hands going for his face, sidestepping and weaving around. He chops the tail next because the neck would be too much of a reach. The demon hits the ground with a hiss of pain as Minato lunges for it. He shifts into Shunshin and aims for the neck. The demon's eyes go wide and it stumbles as it attempts to get away. It raises a hand and Minato's eyes spark. The demon no longer looks monstrous. It doesn't look like a tortured and a twisted person with claws and fangs. Instead, it looks like a little girl with blonde hair and green eyes. The demon looks like Hiroko. Minato falters. It's enough. His feet go out from under him and Hiroko twists under him to avoid the blade. There's a savage look on her face though, one that doesn't belong. Past the demon, Minato sees the golden chains still surrounding three crouched figures across the way as he goes down and he curses himself. A sharp pain flares in his leg as he rights himself, backing away from the demon now wearing Hiroko's face. It grins at him sickly, fangs showing through the haze that changed the demon into someone else. Minato grits his teeth as the demon raised the claws that drew blood from Minato's leg up to his mouth. It licks the blood across its fingers as another haze covers it. Behind the demon, Minato can make out the other demon, or at least the disguised one. It licks the blood, changing from its form into a figure with patient eyes and black hair. The one in front of him calls out its blood art again as it does the same as its counterpart. Instead of the demon in front of Minato taking on the face of Hiroko, there is now another figure. Minato's breath catches in his throat. His eyes shift over the figure that stares at him with hungry eyes. He tries to tell himself that this isn't real, but he knows all too well that it is. The demon had red hair that fell down its face in a long waterfall of beautiful silk. Their eyes are lit with hunger, but Minato would know the violet hue anywhere. Her face, normally soft and kind, is twisted into a mask of beast-like ferocity that reminds Minato of the Kyuubi. Kei Kushina, Minato murmurs, his heart pounding painfully in his chest. He tries to tell himself that the figure in front of him is merely someone stealing his wife's face. Kushina lunges for him. He stumbles and clumsily gets out of the way as pain rushes through him. He's looking at this creature, at this thing. And it's wearing Kushina's face. It's aiming to kill him and he can't focus past the rushing in his ears and the pounding in his chest. He's doing his best to dodge the blows, but the mere idea of slitting her throat makes bile rise in his mouth. He knows this isn't her, knows Kushina is dead and gone. He watched her die. He stumbles, twists to avoid a blow, and grunts as another claw draws blood. The demon grins at him through the haze of red and just barely manages to match Kushina's ferocity. The purple haze is rising below him, but he can hardly spare it a glance before he's avoiding another attack and trying not to lose his head. He knows this demon isn't Kushina, he knows, and yet. Something hits him so deeply that his chest aches and his heart feels like it is tearing into pieces. He hasn't seen her face in 6 months. He hasn't looked at Kushina in so long and he just wants to see her a little longer even if he is pretending. His mouth tastes sweet. The purple haze is growing and he loses focus as the demon lunges again. Minato, get a hold of yourself. Kurama shouts at him, his pulse of chakra sending a red haze around Minato that snaps him into action. He reacts by flickering away from a blow to his chest as the world rushes back into focus. Everything picks up and Minato snarls as he realizes something. He was standing in the purple haze and it left him vulnerable. Now, looking at the demon, he still sees the face of his beloved, but he also sees something else. The Kyuubi's chakra is burning throughout him, clearing away the poison that had tangled with his thoughts and twisted them just enough for the demon's face to register as real to him. He no longer feels the twisted haze and instead he sees the truth. He sees the fool that thought he could take Kushina's face and use it against Minato. A flicker, a lunge, and the demon now yelp and goes down as Minato slams his elbow into its back. He brings the blade down on the demon's neck and the sick squelch that echoes do little to stop Minato. He twists the blade as the demon cries out in pain. He pulls the blade out and slams it down again, ignoring how the demon jerks underneath him. He's angry. So incredibly angry at this demon and himself. He had nearly let himself get distracted and that had almost cost him everything. Naruto is only a few feet away and he is in danger. Minato had lost Kushina, but he swore when she kissed him the last time that he would never lose anyone else. His heart was bleeding, still sliced to pieces after he watched Kushina throw everything on the line for her husband and son. He won't let it control him even as it brews and settles on the surface of his mind. No, Minato takes that biting anger, takes the rage from the Kyuubi living in his soul, and he drags the blade given to him through the neck of the demon. He doesn't stall as he rises. The demon barely let out another cry before it began to disintegrate. The purple haze is rising, but Minato doesn't care. He turns and eyes the demon going for Shinjiro. The demon is wearing Ruka's image and Minato doesn't need to have lived in this world to know that it is also at fault for the desecration of Kushina's face. He grabs a kunai and sends it sailing past the Hashira, who is struggling with their opponent for the same reason that Minato was. The poisonous mist lingers around them, alluding to its purpose even as it begins to fade. Minato flashes into place behind the demon as it drags a nail over the soft features of Ruka. It does a better job mimicking the woman, round and pregnant with a gentle countenance. Minato doesn't stall. His katana whips through the demon as it jerks to him. An arm hits the ground and the red haze around Minato has grown. "Drop the facade, you bastard!" Minato snaps, his eyes burning with anger. He can only think about Kushina, about her soft face and the final smile she gave and how this demon had allowed another to desecrate that image. He intends to end the demon before it can do the same to Ruka. Shinjiro lunges at him wildly, terror and grief on his expression. Minato uses the man's momentum and slings him over his shoulder. He blocks the strike from the demon next as his chakra floods the area. "Why you?" The demon snarls and it twists around to him. A flicker, a shifting as its features take on another form. It's not Kushina, nor is it still Ruka or Hiroko. No, this figure is a little blonde with bright blue eyes. Minato had stumbled before. "Tu-san, don't hurt me." The mimic cries and holds their hands over their head. He wouldn't stumble again. He knows what this thing is. He knows that the face it wears isn't real, and he knows that despite his earlier slip-up he isn't getting lost in that haze of poison again. He strikes and this time he doesn't miss. This time the demon cries out as its head rolls. Minato doesn't spare it a glance, turning instead to the Hashira. Shinjiro takes one more toss of Minato's hand and another dose of his chakra before he comes to. His eyes shift in shock over the field as Minato drops the haze. The poison mist is shoved off, leaving Minato with a Hashira that stumbles and tries to get a hold of himself. Shinjiro looks between him and the demon as he recognizes that he hadn't attacked Ruka, but rather the thing with her face. Minato feels so incredibly tired. He turns, eyes shifting to the haze of chains around the three kids. He sheathes the blade he used after wiping it on his uniform. He then reaches out to the chains and places his hand on the surface. "Naruto, hey, Naruto, it's okay," he calls, letting his chakra overtake the Kyuubi so that Naruto can feel just him. The chains shake. They then begin to recede as scared blue eyes look up at Minato. Naruto shoves past Kyojuro and Hiroko as he slams into Minato. They both go down as Minato drops back, losing his balance. Naruto buries his face in the man's neck and shakes as he cries. Minato holds him close and closes his eyes. He tries not to think about how this could have ended. He doesn't want to fathom it. Unfortunately, this part is over. I hope you enjoyed it. My apologies for all those quotes. Please have a good morning, afternoon, evening or night. See you next time, faves.